All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to be looking at this really interesting audio clip. It's somebody talking about, well, they're kind of reflecting on fasting and feasting. Like they're on this personal journey trying to find some sort of balance. And we're going to, well, trying to figure out what we can learn from them.
Yeah, and the first thing that jumps out at me is just how honest they are. They're like, okay, I've been feasting for the past 4 months, especially, after the holidays and all that. And now it's almost March of 25. And they're kind of feeling this urge to get back into fasting.
Yeah.
It's like, a lot of us can probably relate to that kind of like back and forth. That's something I've definitely noticed in my own health journey.
It is, yeah, like a pendulum swinging between, like you said, that kind of indulgence and that discipline. It's interesting, isn't it?
Totally. But what I find really fascinating here is how this person, they've actually created a structure for themselves to kind of, I guess, manage that cycle. They call it Fast Friday.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, it's catchy, right?
Very catchy.
So they skip dinner on Thursday, fast all through Friday. And they've attached these positive associations to it. Joy, energy, confidence. It's almost like they've turned it into like a game.
Oh, that's such a good idea. There's a ton of research about like anchoring habits to specific cues and how it can really boost how the successful people are at sticking to them. So like in this case, Friday becomes that trigger for their fasting routine. It's like, no more, should I fast today? Should I not? Friday's the day, and that's it.
Exactly. No more agonizing over decisions. Like just set your GPS and go.
I love that analogy.
And speaking of reaching your destination, did you notice the outcome they mentioned? Like consistent high energy and fewer of those energy dips throughout the day. That's got to be appealing.
For sure. Who wouldn't want more energy and fewer crashes? And what I love is they're not just basing this on like, oh, I feel better. It sounds like they've done some digging into the science behind it too.
Right. They may not be throwing around the technical terms, but they're definitely describing the effects of autophagy. Have you heard of it?
I have, yeah.
Yeah.
But for those who haven't, what's the simplest way to explain it?
Well, imagine your body has this built-in recycling system. When you fast, your cells start to break down and reuse all those old or damaged parts. It's like decluttering, but on a cellular level.
I love that, like a good spring cleaning for your cells.
Exactly. And all that decluttering leads to some awesome benefits. More energy, and even some anti-aging effects, potentially.
Okay, so with this Fast Friday thing, they're basically giving their bodies a chance to do this deep clean, which then results in that steady energy they're talking about. It's amazing how we can impact our biology like that, isn't it?
It really is. But it's not just about the physical stuff.
Yeah.
One of the things that really stood out to me is how this person connects fasting to, well, everything. Like their mental state, their emotions, even their spiritual well-being. They really get into how what we eat or don't eat impacts us on a deeper level.
Yes. That mind-body connection is so important. They're definitely turned into that. It's not just about like, oh, fasting helps me lose weight. They're paying attention to how it affects their overall sense of balance and how they feel on the inside.
It's like they're really in touch with that inner wisdom,
Yeah.
And speaking of, their word for 2025 is balance.
Balance. I like that.
Yeah, they even say they don't want to be full-time anything, whether it's like an author or even a faster. They're more about variety. Find that sweet spot, that perfect balance.
I feel that. It's easy to get caught up in extremes, right? Especially these days where everything's like all or nothing. But this person, they're reminding us that, there's power in that middle ground.
It's about recognizing that life is a spectrum, and we're constantly moving through these shades of gray.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes it's those in-between spaces, those moments of pause and reflection. That's where we discover the most about ourselves.
So true. But it's not always easy, is it? Like finding that balance. The speaker even admits to things that throw them off track. They mention alcohol specifically.
Yeah, they were pretty open about how alcohol kind of messes with their energy and throws off that positive vibe they're working so hard to cultivate with fasting.
It makes you think, right? Even those little choices can have such a big impact on our well-being.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It all comes back to self-awareness. Being able to recognize those things that impact our energy, our mood, just how we feel overall, that's key to making choices that really support us,
Recognizing those triggers, right. And being brave enough to make changes when we need to. Which brings us to, well, a pretty interesting part of their journey. They talk about trying a really intense fasting period, 7 weeks, back in late 2024.
Yeah, they lost a ton of weight and felt amazing. But they're very quick to point out that they're not, recommending it for everyone. It's like they realize what worked for them in that specific moment might not be the right thing for everyone else.
It's responsible of them to say that, don't you think? It's easy to get caught up in those, like, the promise of extreme results, but safety and, finding something that's sustainable that's got to come first, especially when it comes to our health.
Right. And it all circles back to balance, doesn't it? It's not about rigidly sticking to one extreme or another. It's about finding something that works for you in the long run.
Yeah.
A way of living that feels challenging, but also nurturing.
So what we have here is someone who has tried both feasting and fasting. They've been through those highs and lows, and it seems like they've realized that real well-being, it's about finding that balance between the two.
Yeah. Like they've gone on this quest to find their own personal formula, their own unique mix of, I guess you could say, indulgence and discipline that helps them thrive. And it's that journey, that quest that we're going to keep exploring.
It's really interesting, as we dig a little deeper into this person's journey, like how they kind of combine, well, the science and the almost like the spiritual side of fasting. Like they talk about those physical benefits, the energy boost, but then also like that mental and emotional clarity. It's like they're tapping into something deeper.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. They talk about feeling this like spaciousness, not just like in their stomach, but like in their mind too.
Yeah.
Like fasting creates this like space for thinking and reflection, a pause that lets those deeper insights come through.
I think that makes sense, right? Because fasting really forces you to be more mindful. When you're intentionally not eating, you start paying more attention to, well, everything. Like when you're actually hungry, those cravings you get, even how you react to food, like emotionally. When you say it's like a practice in being more self-aware.
Absolutely. It's like you're turning up the volume on all those signals your body's sending you. Like you start to notice those little whispers you might have been ignoring before. And once you're more aware of those signals, you can start making better, more conscious choices about what you eat, right?
They mentioned that too, right? About how fasting helps them be more intentional with their food choices. Like they're asking themselves, okay, what's actually going to nourish me? Like on all levels, physically, mentally, emotionally.
That's a huge shift, isn't it? Instead of just like eating whatever, they're really checking in with themselves, considering what their mind needs, what their heart needs, what their gut needs. Do you remember how they talked about like personifying those different parts of themselves? Like the gut wants what's fast and easy. The mind's all about counting calories and nutrients. And then the heart wants those like indulgences, the passion and love, the wine and baguettes.
It is such a perfect way to put it, that internal struggle we all have with food, right?
Yeah.
But in the end, they found that every part of them, well, just feels better when they eat less and choose more mindfully. Like fasting helps them get all those different voices, those desires, singing in harmony.
Exactly. It's not about depriving yourself. It's more about tuning into what actually nourishes you,
Yeah.
on every level. And they discovered that certain things can mess with that harmony. Like they were pretty upfront about how alcohol really affects their energy, like brings them down and disrupts that good vibe they work on building through fasting.
It's a good reminder that even small things, small choices can affect our overall well-being in a big way. And it kind of ties back into their word for 2025, that balance idea, right? Like not wanting to be full-time anything, whether it's, being an author or even being a faster. It's about embracing all those different sides of life.
Yeah, their whole philosophy seems to be about not being too extreme or labeling yourself too rigidly, embracing the fact that life is fluid and full of variety, finding that balance, that sweet spot between all the different roles and experiences we have.
And in a way, that relates back to how they approach fasting and feasting, right? It's not about being super strict on one side or the other. They're figuring out what works for them,
Yeah.
That dance between indulging and having discipline.
It seems like they learned that it's all about finding something you can actually stick with, right?
It's like they've gone through this whole process of trying things out, experimenting with different things to see what really works for their mind and body. They've been through those extremes, but ended up realizing that a more balanced approach is what matters.
That's something we can all learn from, right? Finding that middle ground, that sweet spot where you can still enjoy all the good things life has to offer without, sacrificing your health and well-being in the process.
Exactly. So looking back at everything we've discovered about this person's journey with fasting and feasting and their focus on finding balance, what do you think we can take away from it all? What stands out to you as the most insightful thing?
I think the most important thing is how much they emphasize self-awareness. It's all about tuning into your own body, understanding what you need and what you prefer, and making choices that support your overall well-being. And remembering that balance isn't some finish line you cross. It's an ongoing process of learning and adjusting.
That's such a great point. And as we get ready to wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious to think about how we can use these insights in our own lives, Like, what are some practical steps we can take to create more balance in how we relate to food, our bodies, and just life in general? It's funny, as we're like wrapping up this deep dive into this person's story, I keep thinking about that little detail they mentioned about getting a new microphone. It might seem, I don't know, kind of random, but I think it actually says a lot about how they approach life in general. What do you think?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I totally see it as this like powerful metaphor. It's like they're saying, hey, I'm not afraid to experiment. Like I'm going to try new things, always trying to improve, make things better. And that goes for everything, not just equipment,
Right.
right? But their health, their well-being, just their whole approach to life.
It's like having this mindset of always like improving, being open to stepping outside that comfort zone and seeing what happens. It's like they're embracing the whole journey.
Wow.
The good, the bad, the feast, the fast, knowing that every experience teaches you something.
Exactly. And it all goes back to that idea of balance.
Yeah.
It's not about finding this like perfect spot and never moving. It's more about understanding that balance is this like dynamic thing. It's always changing, always adjusting.
So thinking about everything we've learned about this person, about how they approach feasting and fasting and finding that balance, what are the big takeaways? What do you think is the most important thing we can apply to our own lives?
I think the biggest thing is that reminder that well-being, it's a really personal journey. There's no magic formula that works for everyone. It's all about tuning into your own body, figuring out what you need and what you like, and then experimenting to find what actually works for you.
And giving yourself permission to be curious, right? To explore those different approaches, to be okay with like trying things out and maybe, making some mistakes along the way. Just like this person did with their fasting and feasting, we can do that in all areas of our lives, right? Just be open to trying new things.
Exactly. It's all about finding that sweet spot, that rhythm that works for you. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress, making those small changes, and always trying to make choices that match up with what you believe in and what you're aiming for.
Well said. So as we finish up this deep dive, I think it's a good time to think about our own journeys. What's one area in your life where maybe you could use a little more balance? Could be your diet, your work-life balance, your relationship with technology, anything really.
Yeah, take a moment to just like pause. Listen to what your gut's telling you.
Yeah.
Where do you feel a little out of whack? And what's one small thing you can do today to move closer to that feeling of balance, that sweet spot where you feel your best?
This has been great. Thanks for joining us as we explored this whole idea of feasting, fasting, and finding that balance. Hopefully, it's given you some ideas for your own journey toward greater well-being, a journey that's full of curiosity and self-discovery, and hey, maybe even a few new microphones along the way. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep striving for that sweet spot where you truly thrive.